be able to somehow put these behaviours into what you're trying to get your students to learn. So you have to have places for reflection, students to understand concepts, adaptions, action plans. There's got to be an information provision, there's got to be real discussion, there's got to be collaboration, and students have to also practice, so the teaching practice and learning practice has to come together. So the dilemma really is that educators know what they want to do. The learning behaviours are more sophisticated than some earlier models, particularly if you want to do this at scale. And I think it's the scale issue that really sometimes is the big question that we find difficult to come to grips with. This requires a conscious commitment to design. So understanding and coming to grips with this dilemma, it's this design issue that's very important. So we have seen lecture content shift to online distribution, but we have yet to see online learning interactions utilise more sophisticated learning design patterns. And it's this design issue that we're critically interested in. So basically individuals have to bridge the gap, and so we have basically this valley of death essentially, where we provide these tools for our academics, physical environments such as lecture theatres, interactive whiteboards. We have purchased e-learning products, learning management systems. We have open source systems and locally created ones. So we've given them a toolbox, but we haven't given them the capacity to bridge this gap to how do actually they deliver their courses in a new way using this new technology. So the challenge is it needs to be easier for the average practitioner, teaching academic that is, to embrace new approaches in their professional practice. So the strategic approach from our particular viewpoint is to focus on assistance provided to the teaching academic community to embrace and implement good educational design, which is supported by appropriate technology. And this is sort of the professional learning model. So essentially what we want to do is we want to fill in that gap or that valley of death for a lot of our academics. How do we put in their exemplar courses, standard pedagogies, pedagogical patterns, standard learning activities? And that's what we're really working on in a significant way with our staff at the present time. So we've gone to a model that we call now Design for Learning, or D4L. I was a little bit sort of skeptical or sort of worried when the guys came up with D4L, because if you just take D4 and you come from a farming background, Caterpillar have a bulldozer that's called a D4. And I don't want our academics to understand we're trying to bulldoze something through, because we won't be going very far. But they like the Design for Learning D4L, and they think it's quite catchy. So we're developing an international domestic advisory board so that we get real input into how we actually move forward at the university. We've got a senior leadership group that's led by the Vice Chancellor or the President, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, President of our Academic Board, our Chief Operating Officers, Directors of the Library, of our what we've also worked very hard to do is to make sure that our information technology services, that we bridge the gap between the people who provide the backbone and the people who do the education. And I'm glad to say that that level of interaction has increased dramatically over the last 6 months. We also have a Teaching Education Development Institute, a Centre for Innovation in Professional Learning, and a Centre for Education in Innovation Technology. And so we're bringing all these groups together to try and leverage our capacity within the university. And interestingly, we're seeing a new dynamic happen now because we've just built a new building for Teddy, Sipple and SEEIT, and they're located in the Learning Innovation Building that's really just about centred right in the middle of our St Lucia campus. And in that sort of co-location now, we're seeing new dynamics that we never saw before. And the question will be, how long can they stay apart, and how can we get greater bang for our buck by bringing them together in a more systematic way? And at the operations level, we've moved to academic support, central we're calling, and this involves staff in those centres. We've got, we've got academic support facilities. We've looked at the faculty education designers. We're investing significantly in these education designers because most academics need the support to do what they wanted to fill in that valley of death and to know how to use the new technologies in a constructive way. And we're also looking at how we can not have our information technology services and the library sitting out on the side, but how can we bring them centrally into this particular process. So the strategic approach basically is to characterise good / best practice in learning, assessment and administration of courses, provide an environment of tools and standard approaches that support learning, assessment and administration of courses, focus on marketing these tools, making these tools scalable, sustainable and interoperable and easy to use. And this particular issue about easy to use is very important for a significant number of our academics that are getting towards the end of their careers. Focus on assistance provided to academic teaching community to embrace and implement good educational design, which is supported by appropriate technology via toolkits, templates, understanding of patterns, proven educational design, professional development, opportunities to participate in topic-focused collaboratives, and provide direct support to the design process via educational designers and direct funding for program redesign. And also to continue to facilitate innovation and experimentation, which I think is very important if the program is going to have any significant sustainability and a real life. So we want a well-defined process for prioritising new initiatives and innovation and development project funding, learning analytics. I think every potential click is a data point. And at the present time, we've got a long way to really understand the digital footprint of learning interaction online and how to actually we provide that capability at the departmental level. And proactive engagement with hybrid course design. So we're not saying that this is the be-all and end-all of teaching and learning. So direct support for design, support for more educational designers and support staff, funding and central support to departments and all programs that are re-engineering their program and course designs, particularly through the implementation of technology-enhanced approaches. And we want to look at a return on investments. Funded initiatives must have the prospect to change professional practice in a department or discipline. So do you spread it, you know, like peanut butter across the whole piece of bread and go nowhere, or do you try and pick winners? And that's really one of the real crucial things, I think, in changing a large institution where you have 45,000 students and 7,000 staff. So we've looked at an innovation pipeline or a gated pipeline whereby the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic endorses the process, makes available resource allocation or funding. The e-learning strategy committee reviews and ranks different proposals. Expert stakeholders review for viability, and then they go through submission to a qualifying checklist, and hopefully out of this we have a range of decent ideas that we can invest in and get a return on our investment, because that's really what we are focused on. If we're going to go down this pathway, we want real return in relation to learning outcomes from the investment that we make. So, shareable knowledge base, we're saying that we're filling in this valley of death here for our academics, and the attributes of this area have to be components are easily discoverable, well described, metadata, mechanisms for sharing, standard formats, customizable, reusable, and open. And we really are trying to push this concept that the whole process has to be open, and we can no longer go forward with a model whereby we don't know what's in a lecturer's bottom drawer. Pardon me. And in the open learning objects, examples are text, articles, books, exams, images, videos, and data. And one of the things that we're trying to come to grips with a little bit at the moment is that how do we assess video presentations from students and rank them and give them an appropriate mark? And this is an area that we don't have a lot of skills with at the present time. So if you look at a generic open access university, and I've taken this from Martin Hall, who's VC of the University of Salford. Basically, what we're looking here at, and this sort of gives you a bit of the overall picture. We've got the public sector out here, we've got our students here, we've got face-to-face interactions, we've got people interactions, we've got online learning. We've got online learning, and if we come over here, we've got networks of scholars. So we've got a digital component here. Hopefully we've got an open access repository, and you can see that there's more or less an analog component here where we've got libraries, museums and archives, books, journal, papers, etc. But this part is becoming a little less prominent, and this part of this overall scheme is starting to have more of a dominant role. The third sector over here refers to the not-for-profit. This group is very important because they can help you actually move forward at a very rapid pace. And, you know, just take the Gates Foundation, how much money they've put into higher education. And the private sector, we can't really rule out the private sector because it might be better to do something with Kaplan or one of those groups than to actually try and create it yourself. So how do you use, and is this back room of the university the same back room that you had 10 or 20 years ago, or is that going to change? And if you change, how is it going to help the learning process within your university? So that, now I'll come to the MOOCs idea, because MOOCs have been around for quite some time. These are not a new invention, but I think the fact that they've got a lot of currency over the last year has been wonderful, because at long last the importance of education is not on the side of the table, it's actually in the centre of the table. And so education and the learning program is now being talked about by every president, every vice chancellor of a university, and it's now becoming to be seen as being more critical to the future of the university. Even the politicians in Australia have got interested in MOOCs and are asking questions, what are we doing in this particular area? So they started out as self-managed by groups of learners and teachers meeting over defined period, usually from 6 to 12 weeks, open to all, no entry requirements. Some are purely informal or independent learning aligned with formal courses. Other courses are offered with the prospect for informal certification. The recent MOOCs, though, have moved it up a couple of notches and basically moved to a course model where materials are openly online with where they're computer marked, copyrighted assessment exercises, and certificates of completion are becoming more the formal way that MOOCs are operating within the area. And if you go 11 years ago, Chuck Vest, who was the president of MIT, made a bold statement, I think, and he said, open courseware is not exactly what I expected. And this was the outcome of MIT's foray into putting and seeing an opportunity to use the internet as a way of putting their courseware out there. And a whole host of other universities in that northern sector up around Boston and New York and Philadelphia had spent a lot of money in this particular area. A lot of them had not succeeded in a major way and suffered significant losses, and then went to more boutique ways of using the online system. But I think basically MIT made a very bold move when Chuck Veston announced that the MIT will make the materials of nearly all its courses freely available on the internet over the next 10 years. And he said, open courseware looks counterintuitive. In a market-driven world, it goes against the grain. So clearly, I think this was a sort of something that changed the paradigm a little bit. Then 5 years later, if we go to Berkeley joins iTunes. So this was seen as another significant development. And Berkeley made all its material available through iTunes, berkeley.edu. Then I suppose we come now to Stanford, and this is where I think the hype started to sort of really build up through 2012. We have an elite university offers a MOOC, 166,000 sign up, 23,000 complete, about 14%, offered entirely outside the infrastructure of a university, weekly assignments and feedback taken by Stanford and external students. External students did better. And if you look at the YouTube of this particular event, one of the things they do say, and they're very honest, they say, we discovered another Stanford out there. And so they discovered another fantastic group of students. And you know, what does having another fantastic group of students add to your existing university? That's a lot of intellectual power. And led to the startup frenzy of Udacity, Coursera, edX, etc. And I'm sure everybody's seen the TED YouTube version of Daphne Kohler's presentation, one of the founders of Coursera, but I think it's one of the best ones that you'll look at, and I really recommend that. The Stanford partnership, it was a Stanford partnership, not a Stanford course, the artificial intelligence course that was offered, that attracted the 166,000 students. So we have this, and we've still got it. We've still got the MOOC Mania, Coursera, Udacity, Venture Lab, Class to Go, Course Builder, Course Sites, Blackboard, etc., edX, which now has MIT, Harvard, University of California, Berkeley, and University of Texas. But what we should never forget, though, is that we've had players like the Open University in the UK that really, in many ways, have perfected this online learning approach in a significant way. And I think they've made a major contribution. You can't go also by Penn State's World University, which has been another very fantastic way of delivering their content. If you look at Penn State, I know a little bit about it because my wife is American and went there. They have 20 campuses. They deliver all their programs seamlessly over 20 campuses throughout the university, throughout Pennsylvania, using their World University setup, online learning system. So, and interestingly, there was a meeting in Boston recently where the emeritus president of the University of Massachusetts spoke, and he really started out by giving, in many ways, a lot of the people involved in the MOOCs a little bit of a serve, but it was done in a nice way. He said, we've been doing this for a long time. You're now just discovering it. But coming back to that other point, I think if the MOOCs do nothing more, they've already done us a fantastic favour insofar as learning and educational programs now at the centre of the table in all universities, and all governments now are looking very seriously at learning programs. But I do think the MOOCs do have the potential to make available to students, and if you look at India, which has about 1 billion people, a little bit more than that now, it makes available the best courses, the best teachers from the best universities to students who normally wouldn't have access to some of that material. Now they won't do a degree by it, but they might actually get a thirst and discover learning through it. So it does open up the system. Interestingly, the Gates Foundation has been raising issues of quality of MOOCs, and the Gates Foundation have recently called for funding proposals to look at quality matters in relation to MOOCs. So I think they've created a lot of interest. So our UQ drivers are social, political, sharing selected courses publicly as a taxpayer-supported institution, demonstration of UQ's quality courses, brand enhancement, facilitate model intellectual course on big problems, and so how do we discuss with a greater number of people issues about climate change, deepen alumni connections and engagement. There are pedagogical drivers, develop shared learning design patterns for course design, blended learning to enhance campus-based student experience and leverage our world-class infrastructure. Our engineers are now going to the flipped classroom just about completely, and this type of approach is sitting very well with their flipped classroom approach. Student peer engagement with worldwide learner community, and so how can we actually have many more connections with different universities around the globe and do it virtually. Design opportunity for inverted classroom designs, develop open access resources and services, repositories, and technical feasibility of Blackboard framework for wider and more flexible use, the cloud hybrid, so we can move in that particular direction, trial alternative enterprise frameworks, and we've been looking at Moodle a little bit, explored cloud-based models for learning environments, Coursera and Udacity, and advance the speed of advancement in areas important to both campus-based and broader definitions of UQ's learning community. So traditional course components, basically, we have a 13-week semester, and this is basically how we're thinking of using some of the MOOCs in only a selected number of courses. We start out with weeks 1, 2, and 3 pretty much as normal, and then we spin out into this MOOC. And that the students then get a diversity, we will have a diversity of students, videos, forum discussion, quizzes, assignments, certificate of completion, and they'll do a number of different things, and then we'll come back in and complete the course. Or we might have a course that is completely a MOOC, and we're now very seriously looking at the process of what type of areas in the university do we prioritise for some of these developments. So I think the moment, coming back to that thing that Ken Bain said about personalised learning, the moments of the class must belong to the student and the undivided student. I think we are coming to a stage whereby when we've got a class of 300, there is a capability of using some of this new technology. It doesn't provide the complete answer, but it provides a much better way, especially if we use analytics in a constructive manner, to understand what is happening with the individual student. And at the present time, on many occasions, we know how much a student has learned when the student finishes the summative assessment and exits the course. And so this does provide a mechanism whereby we can find out what's happening much earlier on. One of the other things that we've set up is a Science of Learning Centre, driven by the Queensland Brain Institute, the Centre for Advanced Imaging, School of Psychology and the School of Education. And so this gives us the actual ability, the Centre of Advanced Imaging, to actually go in and look inside the brain and what's actually happening. And so we're trying to bring these interdisciplinary areas together to understand truly how students learn. So I think as a research-intensive university, we should ask research questions about this new learning environment. It is our strength and our responsibility. Some of the possible research questions that we could ask are as follows: the value of peer learning in mixed demographic cohorts. Can we develop shareable learning design patterns? Does open access to course influence public discourse on important questions to Australia and the global community? Does this lens into the quality of UQ courses impact on recruitment of both foreign and domestic students? Are we technically capable of scaling our current learning infrastructure? Can we build, adapt interoperable learning tools, personalising large class experiences? So I think basically it's always dangerous to say that we're at a tipping point, but I think we are at an interesting point whereby at long last some of the promises that the internet has offered, or this approach to learning has offered, can now be delivered. And it's interesting to just look at the Coursera approach to how they actually develop their courses. They're not, they are quite interactive. The fact that if you look at Daphne Koller's YouTube thing, how they can pick out certain concepts that students have poorly understood using their analytics. And I think basically we're at an interesting, I think, tipping point to really fully understand what actually happens in a classroom. We can record it using digital information. We may be able to understand more fully in the next couple of years how students are learning. The only other caveat that I'd put on all this was what Steve Wozniacki, the co-founder of Apple, gave a talk in Brisbane recently. And he said, when I was working in Apple and I was building the computers, he made it very clear that he built the computers, not Jobs. Though Steve Jobs sometimes said he built them, but Steve Wozniacki really built the computers. He said, when I was in the driving seat, at best I could see 1 year ahead. At best, he said, 1 year ahead. To think you can see 2 to 5 years out, he basically said you're dreaming. So I think what we've seen just over the last 12 months, but it's, as you can see from the MOOCs, they've been around for a while, we've seen them come to a bit of a crescendo. What will actually be in the future, I think, will be very interesting, and I think really from a learning perspective will be exciting. So I'll finish there. Thank you. Thank you.